All right, thank you everyone for joining. I'd like to just introduce myself briefly. I'm David Porcaro, the Vice President of Learning and Innovation at General Assembly, based in the Boulder, Colorado area of the United States. I'm fairly new at General Assembly, but I'm really excited to be able to introduce some of our great speakers who have been willing to share some of their experiences in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Before I introduce the topic and our guests, I want to note that this is a recorded webinar, and we're giving the opportunity to ask questions via the Q&A section. We'll try and address some of them. However, please note that if we can't address all of your questions, we will follow up where relevant to provide further insight. Today, we're talking about the importance of DE&I initiatives as they pertain to workforce diversity, retention efforts, and learning. We will discuss the role training plays in diversifying teams, and we'll share practical examples that you can take away as you start implementing your part of DEI strategies in your workplaces. I'd like to introduce briefly some of our panelists. We have with us Matt Powell, the founder of Breaking Barriers, who founded the organization when he realized, while doing a master's degree in international development at the London School of Economics, how little support was available to help refugees integrate into society once they've been granted asylum status. He was convinced that businesses had an important role to play and started by persuading a number of prominent London employers to offer work experience. At the same time, he reached out into refugee communities and found great demand for this experience alongside the advice, training, and English language tuition. I'm really excited to hear more about his experiences there. We have Ankur Gopal, who founded Interapt in his apartment with a vision to create a world-class IT company that transformed clients and empowered humans through technology. In Interapt's early stages of growth, the company struggled to find local talent to the point that it was turning away work, something that nobody wants, but probably something we've all seen. To solve this challenge, Interapt turned into a unique solution of creating their own talent. And I'm excited to hear about that and how he did that. Tara Fosbray is the second vice president of technology at Guardian Life based in New York City. She's a woman in tech advocate and has been leading the Code for Good program, which ran in collaboration with General Assembly to diversify the reskilling tech talent. The program completed in 2021 and had an amazing result of an NPS of 100. I don't think you can get any better than that. So perfect 10s all around if you're in the Olympics. So I would like to take just a moment to talk about GA. If you can just go to the next slide. Thank you. As a brand of the world's foremost provider of staffing, career transition, and talent development solutions of the Adecco Group, General Assembly is a global reskilling company that helps employers to thrive amidst rapid digital transformation. We do that in a few ways. One is closing digital skill gaps among existing employees and building up clients and enterprises' ability to build their own internal talent pool with skilled tech professionals. Second, we also help those companies to build up local external talent pipelines of new and diverse tech talent. We do this with our expert-led accelerators and workshops that blend quality teaching, coaching, hands-on practice with asynchronous self-paced learning. We specialize in the most in-demand skills related to digital capabilities across data, artificial intelligence, software development, digital marketing, and general digital fluency. As you can see, we have a wide range of clients, students, instructors from around the globe. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is built into our mission because we believe that the way to open access to these sorts of jobs in technology is to a more diverse and inclusive tech pipeline. And that means more inclusive learning opportunities. At the heart of this, DEI is important to both learning and innovation. For innovation, we know from years of research that many of our own experiences that the more diverse the lived experiences of your team and the more inclusive of those diverse perspectives and inputs, the more likely you are to have breakthrough innovations. Managing that diversity is not easy, Research shows this, our own experience shows that. It requires strong leadership, including continuous growth and learning, an open and empathetic mindset, and a collection of a wide variety of qualitative and quantitative evidence to measure the impact your design is having on a diversity of users. Secondly, for learning, there's something really interesting research. There's some really interesting research around the role of identity and the sense of belonging to learning. In short, our brains can only process so much at a time. And when we feel threatened or see misalignment with our identity and those around us, or have any sense that we don't belong in a learning space, two things happen. One, our motivation to engage, take risks, put ourselves out there in a learning situation decreases. When that happens, we're not learning. Secondly, our processing capacity is overrun. But as we're looking around for cues to see that we don't belong in a space, our actual brain chemistry changes. The stresses of that situation cause us to process much less and decrease our capacity to think and learn at our best. The good news is the DEI, as you see here, has become a business priority. People are working to create more safe and inclusive spaces in the workplace. They're bringing in more diverse leadership and helping people to learn and grow along their equity journey. So, you know, the stats here, I'm not going to read through them, but you can see the number of people and the amount of interest in this just in the last couple of years has really grown. And that's an amazing thing. And I'm really excited about their growth. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that there's still a long way to go. There's still a lot for us to learn and do to make our workplaces, especially in technology, truly equitable, inclusive, and diverse. And so I'm really excited for the experiences and the lessons learned by our guests today. We have three amazing groups who have been working hard to do just this, to increase the diversity and inclusion of their leadership, of their workforce, of technology in a number of places. And so I'm going to start, without further ado, our conversation with Tara. So Tara, as we start, I would love to hear, what are some of the diversity challenges that you've experienced in Guardian, and how have you overcome those?
Yeah, really good question. So I don't think we're much different from other companies on this. We can certainly do better with more women and just general diversity in tech. To overcome this, we've launched programs like Code for Good, which we've run twice. And we also partner with different non-for-profits and schools to feed into our recruiting and on-ramp strategies. In addition, we have a very robust intern and early career program. So we very much are trying to build that pipeline early on and convert our interns into our early career program.
Excellent. And what were some of the things that you're most excited about and some of the successes that you've seen in that?
So the successes for Code for Good, you know, it's life-changing. You know, some of the impacts from that. From the early career perspective, you know, Guardian is an old company. We've been around for over 160 years. So we have, you know, systems that my boss will affectionately say were built before a man walked on the moon, and are still running. So, you know, we need to ensure that we are fueling our pipeline as people retire out of the organization. We need to make sure that we have a flow of pipeline coming in to start, you know, continuing Guardian. So we're around for another 160 years. So it's really important. You know, one of my main strategies to support that is building that early career pipeline, so that there's an enormous amount of focus on that.
Excellent. And I wasn't, it didn't go past me that you said before a man walked on the moon. Hopefully we'll be able to get to a space right, where we're talking differently about our expectations on that.
No pun intended there.
Next, I'm going to turn to breaking barriers. So Matt, we'd love to learn about BB's mission, and if you can share a little bit more about the Refugee Pledge, which GA is a part of.
Absolutely, thanks, David. So Breaking Barriers is a charity that I set up to help refugees in the UK integrate through supporting them into jobs. To give a bit of context, several 100,000 people from a refugee background in the UK that have arrived here over the last few years and several decades, but unemployment levels far higher than the native British population and other immigrant groups. Some generic barriers that all immigrants face: lack of UK work experience, lack of knowledge of the labour market. But one challenge that our refugee client group faces, and that's very specific to them, is the nature of the asylum process here in the UK. So that's the time that you're waiting for a decision before you get granted your refugee status where you're allowed to work. That process is very lengthy here. And also you can't work whilst you're going through it. The longest I've seen is over 20 years, so 24 years, someone going through that process. So I'm sure you can imagine the challenges that someone faces finding work when they've been waiting 24 years to have their asylum case heard. So we saw an opportunity to work with businesses. So we've worked with over 30 businesses since we were set up, the likes of BNY Mellon, WeWork, Western Union, Ipsos Mori, Bank of America, and businesses who have kind of put their hands up and said, this is something that we care about. This is something that our employers care about. And as part of our D&I agenda, we want to make sure that we're supporting refugees into our workplace. So we created our Fuse network, which we launched in Refugee Week this week, which is bringing all of those businesses together. I'm very grateful and delighted that General Assembly pledged to join that network and continue to support refugees in the UK to support them either with training opportunities or with employment opportunities.
And as you work with businesses and help to get people to sign up with that Refugee Pledge, what are some of the biggest mindsets that you've seen have had to shift? Or how hard has that been for people to shift their mindsets around this?
I don't think mindsets have really shifted. I think by and large, you speak to businesses that you think probably wouldn't be interested in this space over the last 3 or 4 years. And what I've learned is 95% of employees are sympathetic to causes and want their business to do something. And that hasn't changed. What's changed now is there's now a top-down appetite to do something. And that's saving us time and energy in terms of working with those CSR teams, the HR teams, the diversity and inclusion teams to create business cases for their senior leaders. I think now with what happened last year with the George Floyd killing and a re-emphasis and momentum being built around diversity and inclusion, no business is not doing anything for something now, or even the businesses that we're ignoring it as something they should be getting involved in are doing something. So I think that senior leader mindset around this isn't just something that we should be doing, we'll get left behind as a business if we don't do something in this space has changed over especially the last 18 months.
And as you think about your successes over this period of time, what achievements are you most proud of to date? And what are some of the actions that you're taking to drive real impact towards those achievements?
So lots of really amazing achievements. I think the impact that we have with our corporate partners is particularly powerful. And we had one partnership with IKEA, which began as a small pilot in London, and that convinced their global CEO to roll out a refugee hiring initiative in every market across the globe, which was amazing, because what started off as supporting 30, 40 people in London will now support 5, 6, 7,000 people across 50, 60 different markets over the next 3 years. So that's really special. But we're now scaling outside of London for the first time. So we'll be opening our first offices. I don't know if your audiences will know Birmingham and Manchester, but we are opening in 2 other cities in the UK in 3 weeks' time. So that's really exciting. So yeah, lots of stuff and lots of milestones. But I think the work that we're doing with corporate partners to influence them is is as impactful as the work we're doing with our refugee clients to change their lives.
Excellent, thank you. I'd like to turn the time over to Ankur and hear a little bit more about your story and Interapt story. How did it all start and what was the mission?
Well, thank you. I guess for context, Interapt, we're an IT services firm that I started in 2010 in my home state of Kentucky. We're headquartered in Louisville. We have locations in Chicago, Atlanta, throughout the Midwest. And typically what we do is we service large enterprise with cutting edge technologies, mobile web application dev, data science, cybersecurity, BPO, cloud, et cetera. So that was what we had built a company around. And as an entrepreneur, about 5 years into the company, we started getting a lot more work. Our clients were asking us, "You're doing good work. Can we give you more?" And I said, "Great. All I have to do is hire another 150 people." And so we started hiring. Well, we couldn't find them. We couldn't get them to relocate. It was just a very difficult task, to the tune of, and you'd mentioned this earlier, for the audience, we turned away $9 million worth of work is what we estimated, because we couldn't find the talent. So instead of banging our heads against the wall, we decided to do something creative, and we just built our own sort of talent pipeline. And we built our own curriculum, built our own training program, and we started training folks that had the aptitude, but maybe not the opportunity to get into tech. So think history majors, anthropology majors, people who are looking for a job change, whatever they needed, and it worked. So we started building our own talent from within. Around the same time, our governor and congressman asked if I would go and help people in Appalachia who were suffering from the decline of the coal industry, and see if I could find similar aptitude there for tech jobs. I wasn't sure if I could, but we went and tried, because it was a pretty interesting task for us to do. And we thought it would change a lot of lives if it worked. I'm pleased to say we did. We took 50 people. We built a program where we paid them while they learned. We trained them. 35 out of the 50 made it to the end of the finish line and are still working an IT job today, which I think that's 5 years later. So that's a very proud statistic. But then we started getting the national radar. Companies started calling us saying, "Hey, can you do that for us too? Can you help us build versus just buy talent?" And then we started to realize that this was something that we not only were really good at, but something that was really impactful in our communities. So we started opening up academies, or call them citizen academies, if you will, in West Atlanta, the poorest zip code, in rural Kentucky, in our own hometown of Louisville, Chicago suburbs and areas in the South Side and places like that. And we were able to find talent in multiple locations. We were able to create opportunities for folks that were typically left behind by the tech economy. And that became kind of our sort of I guess, tip of the spear when we go and talk to companies, because a lot of companies, like Matt said, have become really, DE&I has become front and center. And to that point, Matt, you'll be pleased to know that we have a number of refugees that have entered our program and are thriving and doing great work. And Tara, to your point, about 55% of our workforce are women in tech, a lot of single moms, a lot of people returning to the workforce. So we're very proud of that as well. But I think that what's unique about our sort of company now in this day and age, 2021, companies are calling us to say we need to be more thoughtful in how we bring in new talent, because it's not just about giving someone a certificate or a training program. There's a lot of things that you need to provide people: guidance, support, financial literacy. Many people in our programs have never made this much money. Many of our programs have people who are under the poverty level, and we're lifting them up in a very short order. That type of shock is something we had to build into our model to make sure that doesn't impact the individual. So to give you a quick example, when you take someone off of above the poverty line, they no longer qualify for food stamps or housing assistance or Medicaid. So on-ramping them to where they're paying rent, paying for groceries, paying for healthcare, or at least getting it through the company, that's something we learned along the way as well. But I'm pleased to share some of our lessons learned. There's a lot of them, but I'm very proud of the work we're doing. We have a mission to work with General Assembly. Excuse me, I forgot to mention that. We stopped building our own curriculum and partnered with General Assembly in 2019 to do our training arm, because it was a tremendous partnership, bringing the quality of training we needed to service enterprise clients. The curriculum was what we needed, the rigor was what we needed, and that really set people up for success. So, with that, my vision now is to create 10,000 technology jobs across the country, which we are actively doing in multiple cities. Soon we'll be launching in Puerto Rico and Texas and Arizona and in New York and New Jersey area. So I'm very proud of that mission that we've been able to adopt.
I'm really glad that you're reaching out to the, in the case of the United States, the middle parts of America. A lot of times those areas get ignored in the conversation around diversity, the remote workers, smaller towns. Even, I worked in Silicon Valley for a little while. The amount of people that I talked to that had no idea that there was anything between the East Coast and the West Coast in terms of tech, but also just being able to, as we move to a more remote workplace, open up the access of jobs to people in towns that are looking for a boost to their economy. This is a really great way to be able to increase that. So excited about that mission and the focus on different kinds of diversity that are often like socioeconomic, rural versus urban, different geographies that are often left out of the discussion. I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of the things that you've learned from working with GA as we've tried to play a bigger role in fostering a more diverse and inclusive technology ecosystem throughout America. What were some of the successes you've seen? I know you talked about that curriculum aligning. Tell me more about that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we entered into these agreements with companies, we know their tech stack. We know what we're getting into. If we can do it, we have a team. We build out teams to service that. So working with GA on fine-tuning curricula, because every enterprise has different tools. They may have different sort of processes and some different sort of flavors of things they need. So we go in and we plan with our partners, their enterprise partners, on what they're looking for. Maybe new technologies they're buying in the next 24 months. And then we're ramping up, we're helping them with that as well. So with GA, when we were able to kind of work with the curriculum team to start sort of plugging and playing a few customized modules, so that was really helpful in getting people ready from day one. A lot of our clients, when we ask them for feedback, they actually have told us some pretty amazing things. I'll share one, is that when Interapt brings new people or new graduates from our General Assembly training, they're ready day one. So they're ready to work day one, as opposed to where you're ingesting someone from maybe a different type of training or pathway where they have to kind of learn additional things to become part of the team. So typically that takes anywhere from 2 to 6 months in some cases. So being able to quickly expedite the sort of the velocity and the effectiveness of the individual, that's something that we've worked closely with the curriculum team at GA on. It's been working really well.
Great, thank you. I'm going to turn back to Matt, breaking barriers. What are some of the greatest challenges that communities face today? And are you able to share any case studies or stories with our audience about how breaking barriers and General Assembly have supported refugees to find meaningful work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest challenge that the refugee community faces, as well as other marginalized communities, is the exclusion from the labor market because of its digitalization. I think whilst there's been so many positives that have come from the digitalization process over the last 18 months, I think it has dramatically increased inequalities, not just in terms of engagement with the labor market, but access to other important services such as healthcare. And in the UK, we've had real challenges around people accessing COVID information, which is why a lot of people without digital access have been disproportionately impacted by it. So for us, it's really about providing better digital access to our refugee community, whether that's mobile phones, laptops, computers, but then also providing them with the training. There's one thing having a laptop, but if you don't know how to meaningfully use it, there's still a significant issue there. So the digital access piece and the digital capability piece is really important. And that's where we provide in-house support, and then we'd work with organizations like General Assembly, who are very generously providing sponsored access to some of your training courses for our refugee community, as well as also providing upskilling for our staff, so our staff can then share that knowledge with our clients as well. And then we had one client called Yusuf, who enrolled with us for a few years ago, wanted to become a software engineer, hadn't been able to support him into that role for the last few years until we signed a partnership with General Assembly early last year. He went onto one of your immersive courses, really impressed, then started the full-time course in December last year, and secured a permanent role as a cloud solution architect in March, just a few months ago. So I can assure you that without General Assembly support, he definitely wouldn't have got that role through us, for sure. So it goes to show the massive impact businesses can play, either granting us access to their own training opportunities or granting access to job placements and job opportunities as well. So any businesses out there interested in doing something similar, please do reach out.
Great, thank you. Going to turn it back to Ankur again. Do you have a perspective on the role that learning plays in diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts? Are there any lessons that you've learned about how to make these programs more successful, more inclusive?
Yeah, so if you look at, if you're really serious about diverse DE&I, if you're really serious about it, you've got to look at the history of how we got here in the first place, right? There's been inequity, there's been many barriers to access. So just going out and saying, I'd like to hire more, DE&I candidates, like they exist off the street, they just don't. So you have to go out and be intentional about building them, finding them, and nurturing them. So the lessons, so it's not just about saying, instead, if I've got a 500-person hiring pipeline this year, I'm going to make 25% of them DEI candidates. It doesn't happen that way. You have to go out and address the root causes and some of the barriers that exist. So in our world, what that means is that when we bring people into a training program, we make sure that they don't have any barriers. Do they have fast enough internet? Do they have a laptop? Do they have a daycare? Do they have the wraparound services? So we partner with a number of organizations in our community, Urban League, Goodwill, places like that, City of Refuge in Atlanta, so places like that are really fantastic at that sort of thing. So making sure that, so once they're in the program, they have the resources they need to succeed. And we have a mentality of once you're in the program, it's kind of a no soldier left behind mentality. Everyone gets over the finish line and passes, and we take the time and effort to do that. I empower our training teams and our support teams to do exactly that. Lastly, once they get into the job, I can sit here all day long and tell your audience that we're a great company and we come work for us. But it doesn't really matter for the CEO or founder to say that. It matters if the people in the company say the same thing. So we pair up individuals to where if perhaps you're a neurodiverse, candidate, we pair you up with someone in our company that has identified themselves with an affinity of being neurodiverse, and they tell them exactly how they've worked here for 3 years and what they've learned. So that peer sort of relationship, we help foster and build that. Military, if you're coming out of the military and a transitioning soldier, you have something in common with some of our other veterans that we have employed our company. Single mom, return to the workforce, these types of affinities that we identify, we're very intentional about pairing them up and making sure that they succeed. And of course, we make sure that it's working. If it doesn't work, we'll change it. We have low attrition. We have tremendous employee satisfaction. People have opportunities to give feedback when something doesn't work. And we have fine-tuned programs that we've maybe not done as well as we could have, and that we learn from our own individual employees. So doing that, those sort of things, it's not just about hiring people that check a box, it's about supporting and nurturing them along the way. And that's what our company does really well.
Excellent. There's a decent amount of research that when people are coming into a field where they feel some sort of stereotype threat, whether it's women or racial minorities or whatever the category. If someone feels like they're in a situation where they're not going to succeed because of whatever that characteristic is, they probably won't. It gets in the way of learning, it gets in the way of growth and taking risks. And one of the things to pair that up with is to be able to have a mentor who looks like you, who's gone through that process, is 1 or 2 steps ahead, and can say, I made it through, you can make it through. And the research on just being able to connect people, or to see people like you succeeding in that field, does wonders. So it's really great that that's how you're applying that and seeing that. And I'd love to know, Tara, tell me a little bit more about some of the ways that you are working with General Assembly and Guardian, and what you've done together and the impact of that work.
Yeah, thanks, David. So we have run 2 of those Code for Good immersion cohorts. We ran one last year with 5 folks, and we ran another one with 5 this year that just graduated. So that's 10 people that we have essentially changed their lives. They woke up one day as members of customer service teams. And 12 weeks later, they went to work as developers on tech teams, where honestly, they begin a career of endless opportunities. So pretty life-changing for them. And as someone mentioned earlier, perfect NPS score. So we've done really well with that and placing them. I think what's next for us is keeping at it, keep exploring, keep getting involved, keep finding ways to push the envelope, and keeping diversity of thought top of mind. I'm one of the champions of it here. And as an example, I think I need to get time with Ankur and Matt to see if there are synergies with their organizations to explore. So I think it's through networking opportunities that we uncover and find other ways to get involved and other organizations to partner with.
I am a huge advocate of networking and working together on this, because we're not going to be able to solve some of these massive challenges in pockets and individuals. We need to be able to empower and collect and gather all of the allies in this space together and work together and make that happen. So great point. I'd love to hear maybe a little bit more. We got a question that came in, and Ankur talked a little bit about it, but I'd love to hear what Guardian Life is doing to create more inclusive spaces for when you do get more diverse talent coming in, to make sure that they're able to thrive in their work settings.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. If you can get them, can you keep them, right? And I think, it's really important that we offer, at Guardian, we offer many different ERGs, many different community groups that are sort of self-organized amongst the employees and led by, have a senior leadership sponsor. I think those are really great ways to sort of increase the engagement and increase the inclusiveness, and also honestly educate everybody, right? So, on our women's leadership network, we want men to be part of that, right? In our and in some of our other ERGs, the same thing. We want to sort of cross-pollinate in these groups, because that's how we start to really benefit from that diversity of thought and really start learning from each other. So that's one of the key areas that we focus on. Our spaces, our office spaces, are also very collaborative. We have lots of different areas for collaborating, lots of open space, even though we're not in the office right now. At some point, we will all be back in the office and able to, collaborate a little more easily. But I think, those are some of the things we're doing.
Excellent. I imagine part of this includes finding and gathering, as we mentioned, getting networks of leaders who are champions for this. Tell me a little bit about how you help to build the leadership to be able to support and strengthen these kinds of efforts.
Yeah, I think, Guardian's a pretty special place. It didn't take much convincing to, get senior leadership buy-in. especially from, you know, an ERG sponsorship perspective, our different communities that we have here as well. Our leaders are very, very involved and very engaged. You know, one of the things about Guardian's culture is people really do care, and we see that in our people. They really model that. They're very empathetic, they're very authentic, they're very genuine. So it doesn't take a lot of pushing to get that support, which is really nice.
Thank you. We had a question that came up that I think is related to some of what you're saying, so I'm going to take a second to ask it now. Around these ERGs and affinity groups, oh, excellent. Dogs are welcome to this webinar as well. I just want to put that out. This is an inclusive space for all creatures. And, you know, as we think about affinity spaces, multiple people have intersectionalities, multiple affinities that they identify with. Identity is a complex and multifaceted topic, and people don't fit necessarily into boxes in the way that sometimes we like to put them in. How do you address this as people, you know, identify with affinity groups and affinity groups work together at those points of intersectionality? And this can be, we can start with Tara, but if anyone else, Ankur or Matt, has any perspective on this as well.
Yeah, I think all I'll kind of add there is, you know, I think it's definitely a topic that's covered in some of our ERGs and our communities. It's definitely front and center. And I think having that executive leadership support of these groups really sort of makes it feel inclusive and have that that environment.
Ankur, I noticed you answered in the Q&A itself, but do you want to add any color to your response?
Sure. I mean, it was a question about how do you could, the affinity thing I mentioned, we allow people to select multiple affinities. For example, mine is, you know, father likes tennis, you know, this and that. So we have multiple, it's not just neurodiversity or single mom. We basically have multiple things that people feel comfortable self-identifying as. So we're able to see a kind of a nice sort of conversational way of what people feel that they are, and that's something that we even get, even if we miss one, we have our employees that give us, hey, what about this, or I like that. We put it on there. We want to know we want you to bring your real self to work. We want you to feel comfortable being here, because that's, shockingly enough, how we're going to get the best work out of you, right? So we believe in investing in that up front, because, you know, an unhappy or an unhappy or an unsafe feeling in an organization or somewhere where people don't feel comfortable coming to, that's just not going to jive well with our sort of long-term vision. So we make sure that up front that support is there. They know we're intentional about it. They know we care about it, and we walk the walk. So that's why when I hear that, when the question came up, I was like, you can identify in multiple areas, and sometimes you may need a little bit of support in one and not the other. But I tell you what, I've happened to meet, like I said, I play tennis. I've happened to meet several tennis players in my company that we start hitting now on weekends, and we became friends. That's the whole goal of it, to feel that you can be supported inside of an organization, not mutually exclusive from your personal life.
Thank you. We've talked about the tech discipline a lot, and I'm curious if you have experienced, any of you here, how different industries will face the challenges of implementing more diverse, equitable, and inclusive workspaces and environments, and the issues that come up there as pertaining to tech talent. Is it different outside of the tech sector? Tara, you're shaking your head, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I honestly don't think there's a difference based on what industry you're in. I think the same challenges exist across the board as it relates to technology, whether you're in a technology company, if you're in an insurance company, if you're at a bank, no matter where you are, I think you're facing the same issues.
I believe your faith. I agree with that, but I also will say and add a little bit to that is that we get asked all the time, like, "Hey, we need workers too. Can you train nurses?" I said, "Well, we don't really do that. We don't do that, but we can create a program where they can these individuals inside of a healthcare organization can work on your population health data, work in data analytics, help drive those sort of roles that need. In fact, even training some of your nurses to do that could be a value add. So we help coach. It's not one or the other. I believe that in our world, we're all tech. Everything is tech, right? So we sell tech skills and tech services. So for us, we have to be even more deliberate about this. So we constantly are doing continual training. Every year, people add different coursework and things to keep honing their skills. New versions of softwares come out, et cetera, et cetera. Inside of other organizations, like Tara mentioned, you're going to have to create an agenda where you're upskilling your individuals in technology skills. Maybe not as deep as what we do, but there's definitely going to be that necessity. And if you're talking specifically about DE&I and doing that, you're not going to have a lot of people that can do this on their own. You need to be able to do this inside of the organization, as opposed to, hey, if you want to progress, you should go take a class at a community college or on your own time. We typically build it into our work stream, and that's what I think more companies are going to have to do if they're really serious about it.
I'm not probably well placed to talk about the tech industry, but looking across all of the industries that we work with, I think there are differences in terms of the challenges that industry has. The tech industry perhaps struggles with women in certain areas. The sector I come from, the charity sector, over 80% of the charity sector is women in the UK, but none of them, well, a much smaller minority of those make it to senior leadership positions. And that's a really significant challenge that the charity sector faces here. We also have a massive issue with representation of our beneficiaries at all levels of the organization, which we need to become much better at. So that there are real differences in terms of the areas that you need to focus on, but what you need to do as a business to overcome them are pretty similar. It's a demonstrating a willingness, firstly, from top to bottom, that you want to make changes, and getting that senior buy-in, putting time and energy, investing in understanding where you're doing well and where you're not doing well, and then investing resource into overcoming those areas and not focusing solely on diversity. I think the inclusion element of it is the bit that quite often gets overlooked, because they're so interlinked. Because if you have a diverse recruitment pathways that are getting diverse talent in, but they're not feeling included and able to thrive in your business, that's a real problem. But also, if you create a really inclusive environment, that will also drive diversity. So you have to work on both in synergy with one another, because they're equally important.
Great. I'm going to follow up a little bit deeper on that question. You talked about measuring the impact of DEI initiatives and being able to benchmark an organization's strengths and areas of growth. I'd love to hear from anyone, what are some of the efforts that are going on around that? What have you observed and experienced as companies do that?
I can chime in on that one. I know Anita Borg and Grace Hopper have a top companies analysis that they do, and they do a really good job at analyzing company data and providing those industry benchmarks. The key is the data easily accessible at your company, which is, I think, where things get tripped up.
Anyone else with experiences as we collect that data and measure and analyze and make decisions around it?
I mean, Tara hit it on the head. We measure it. I actually asked my HR team. I can tell you, we have 60% people of color, 25% veterans, 55% women. Our attrition rate is 3.8%. This is the data we care amongst all of our employees. We even measure it against our DE&I employees, which is very similar. So it's not a unique number. So those are the things that we track and manage to make sure that are people happy here? Do they feel empowered here? Are they doing interesting work? Do they feel they can have a career here? And those, I mentioned some surveying we do, but those are things that my head of HR and head of people, they know that they know when they meet with me, that's the first or second thing I'm going to ask them about our metrics. So making sure it's available is absolutely correct.
Great. We've talked a little bit about mindset shift and leadership and making sure that people are on board. And we kind of hear this consistent story of, I think things are changing. So do you see that executives are still asking for a business case in discussing and planning future DEI programs? Like, how are these efforts going to improve our business impact or our bottom line? Or are we past that business case thing yet?
I could do a whole webinar on just that question, but I will make a quick attempt at it. So there's two types of people who, when it comes to DEI, people who care about it and people who don't, right? So, and the events of the past 2 years have shown us that it is a problem. It needs to be addressed, and people need to be intentional about it. So companies are doing that because but are they doing it because it's the flavor of the month, or are they doing it because they really see a business case around it? So let's forget about the business case on DE&I and whether diverse teams do produce more productive teams, which is proven. But let's just say simple things that they do understand: talent. You cannot, if you do not have the talents to compete, you will not be able to have competitive advantage. You need people to fulfill your strategic goals. And that, in regard, by the way, if you're looking at untapped resources, you've got to look in places that typically have not been tapped. Where are the gold mines? Where are the diamonds in the rough? And that's where we believe the companies that are doing this really well are being intentional, and they're going out and creating opportunities and creating pathways to do it. Just saying we should hire 5 more people of color this year isn't going to do it. And that's not the companies that are winning this sort of discussion, how they're doing it. All the companies I meet and I have these sort of networking conversations with, they're bringing great ideas in their own companies. They're doing it their own way, but they're being intentional about it. They're going out and saying, we want this to occur in our company, not just because it's the flavor of the month, not just because it's a checkbox, it makes us look good. It's because it matters and drives business results as well as the right thing to do. So those are the great conversations I have. But believe me, there are people that say we care about shareholder value. We don't care about this. We care about getting the best people, and that's how we're going to keep driving. Well, that'll only take you so far. And even those companies are calling us and saying, okay, we need to start looking at places where we haven't looked before, because we're seeing that we're falling short on our market offerings because we don't have a diverse agenda and we don't bring people with different schools of thought into our organization. So whatever camp you're in, it's a business imperative as well as the right thing to do. So take your pick. But at the end of the day, we all need to be intentional about solving this problem together. That was as short as I could make.
Yeah, you look like you have something to add.
I agree with everything that Anka said. Speaking to the businesses that we work with, if you take law, for example, how do you differentiate between the legal services of the top 100, 200 law firms? Well, if you look at the pitch decks they're now using to win business, you've got 40 pages. Page 2 to 40 would be about their legal services. Page 1 will be about what are they doing in the ED&I space? What are they doing about corporate social responsibility? It's now how businesses are differentiating themselves from other organizations offering very similar products and services. So even those businesses that are ignoring it aren't going to be able to ignore it for much longer. Some of our businesses are now incorporating questions around D&I, recruitment of refugees, recruitment of other marginalized groups as part of their procurement processes for their supply chains. So more and more businesses are just going to move towards being forced to become ethical for even those businesses and the business leaders that really don't, because if they don't, their businesses are going to suffer and their shareholders won't be happy. So it's a journey that the more progressive business leaders will pick up on sooner rather than later, and the others will reluctantly do it further down the line.
Yeah, I think the only thing I could add, and I agree wholeheartedly with both of you, and Matt, I love how you got into sort of the full supply chain, because it does touch everything. It's not just the technology teams, it's not just the HR teams. It really is everywhere. And I think once companies really start to wake up to that, we'll come more around. But to answer the question, I think I don't think we're past the business case thing yet. I think it varies. I think companies are trying, but I think there's still work to do there.
Well, I just looked at the clock and realized how quickly this time together has gone. And as we wrap up, I want to ask one final question. This has been an amazing discussion, and I would love to dig deeper on many of these topics with each of you individually. Hopefully someday we'll be able to meet in person and do that like over lunch or something. Like, imagine that, seeing human beings again in person. But as we wrap up, I want to ask, what is one single most important takeaway that we can give to our attendees pertaining DEI initiatives that they should think about? And we'll start with Tara and then go to Ankur and Matt.
Keep at it. Keep at it. Keep at it. It's so worth it and rewarding from both a delivering product perspective, but also the pay it forward, feel good, do the right thing.
I've kind of echoed it this whole hour. It's be intentional. Don't just say it and just kind of just do it, but not just do it. Do it in a thoughtful way. The same way you would bring a new product to market, the same way you would tackle a strategic imperative, the same way you would tackle a crisis in your company. Treat it the same way. Be intentional about it. Make a roadmap, plan, metrics the same way you do it, and hold yourself accountable to that, because that's the only way it gets solved.
I echo what Tara and Ankur said, and I would say get comfortable being uncomfortable, because it's not easy, and it's daunting, and it's scary, and we're all on journeys, and some of us are at the very beginning, and well, the journey's never going to end, right? Because there's not a business, no matter how big or small, in this in the world that has nailed ED&I. It's an ongoing journey that we'll all be going on. So don't be daunted and don't be scared. Wherever you're on that journey, it's okay to start now, no matter how small those steps are. But it's going to be challenging, but approach it with good intentions, as Ankur said.
And I would add to all of this, build up your team of allies, find others who you can work with and support each other like we've done today. There's a lot of people who've been watching this that are, allies in this space, and we want to be able to band together, because it's in that networking and community that we're going to make the differences that we want to see. Thank you so much for your time. I know we didn't get to all of the questions. We'll follow up where we can, but I do appreciate everyone for spending this time together with us today, discussing this really important topic. As we create these spaces for these discussions, for that uncomfortable work, that's where learning happens. That's how we learn and grow, and we become better people, better leaders, better technologists, better communities. And I'm really excited about the progress that we've been making together, and look forward to more. Thank you so much for your participation today.
Thanks, David.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And feel free to reach out if you need any questions offline. Happy to do so.
Great. Thank you.